Hey everybody, it's Paul Postal with the Digital Map Makers Academy, and in this episode I'm going to show you how I made the map that you're seeing on the screen behind me right now. This is for my Curse of Strahd game, and I wanted to make a map of Barovia that looked old, weathered, had some torn edges, maybe some burnt edges for my players to find. And so this is the map that I ended up making. And I use Wonderdraft, and I also use Photoshop to make this map. So let's go ahead and jump in and I'll show you how I made this. So let's go ahead and jump over to Wonderdraft first of all. So this was the finished map that I made in Wonderdraft, and I'm really going to focus more on Photoshop for this video, not so much on Wonderdraft. So I just want to, I'm not going to go through and show you how I made this map. I just want to show you one thing, and let's look at the overlay here, because Wonderdraft does have a feature that you can use an overlay. So what I did was I took the official map from the Curse of Strahd module, and I imported it into Wonderdraft, and I use it as an overlay. So I just lowered the opacity down, and then I just took like tree symbols, mountain symbols, the pathing tool, and just laid all that down and made the map. And so once I was done, and it probably took me maybe over the course of 3 days, maybe a total of about, I'd say probably probably almost 4 hours, because I was getting kind of nitpicky about how I wanted it. But it ended up looking like this, and I was very happy with it. You'll notice there are no labels, because I did everything else in Photoshop, including the labels. So let's jump over to Photoshop, and I'll show you how I did that. So here we have Photoshop, and this is the image that I exported from Wonderdraft. And what I did is I used a 2x upscale export as a JPEG from Wonderdraft, because that way, using the 2x upscale, it made it double size, made it much easier to work with, and made things more visible. So this is the actual map. So the first thing I did was I put all my labels in. And you don't see any labels on here. I've already put them in here, but I have them hidden right now. But I'm going to put one label in and show you how I did it. And so the way you put labels in, if you're not familiar with Photoshop, is you just use your text tool, which is right here. And I'm going to put in a text here for the Svalich Woods. So what I did was I used a monotype Corsiva text, kept it on regular, but I changed the size to 30. So we're going to change the size to 30, and then we're just going to type here Svalich Woods, and then we're just going to press on our check mark for Photoshop to accept it. Now you'll notice it is kind of hard to see, so I'm going to zoom in here, and so you can see this part of the map. And the first thing I want to do is I want to get this position a little bit more. I don't like where I actually have it, so we're going to do Control T for transform. We're just going to grab it and just move it over a little bit right here. And I'm good with that. So we're going to click on the check mark so Photoshop will accept it. And you'll notice that it's still a little harder to see. And so what I did was, after this, I just put a simple outer glow layer style on it. So two ways you can get to layer styles. You can click on layer here and just go to layer style that way. But the quicker way is to actually just click on the text layer itself, or whatever layer you want to put the layer style on, and just double click. And then the dialog box will come up. Let's leave it here. So actually I think I'm going to move the map over a little bit so you can see the effect here once I do it. So I'm just going to click here on outer glow. Now the settings are already here that I use because Photoshop saved them. So what you see on the screen right now is what I did. So I kept the blending mode on normal. I made the opacity about 76%, kept the color as white, because I'm going to add in a parchment texture later on, and that really kind of tempered down the white color so it wasn't so bright. Kept the technique on softer. I kept the spread at 26%. Size, I made 10 pixels. And the contour I used, which I ended up liking, was one called Rounded Steps. So this was the one I used right there. The range I kept at 38% and no jitter at all. So that is the outer glow that I made for the label. So I'm going to put this back over here, and I'm going to show you my other labels right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my labels group, and this is all the labels that I put in for this map. Now one of the things I do want to say is you definitely want to group all of your layers that are similar. So all your label layers or your text layers, put them all the same. If you have texture layers that are similar, put them in groups. So I'm going to show you very quickly how to do that. So I'm going to expand this group here. I'm going to drag this one down here so it's in the group. And then I'm just going to go ahead and just click on this and do ungroup the layers. So you'll see they're all ungrouped now. And what I'm going to do is show you how you can select these all at once. So this is all my text layers. I'm just going to scroll down here to the very bottom one. If you hold down Shift and click on the bottom one, it selects all of them. And then to put it in a group, all you do is press Control G. And then you'll notice that it says Group 1. Always a good idea to label all your layers, label all of your groups. So I'm just going to, oops, brought up the layer style. Make sure you're on your text when you double click. And I just labeled this one labels. So again, really important to label everything when you're working with layers in Photoshop. Otherwise, you're going to be clicking on the little eyeball here things just to try to figure out which layer that you're actually working with. Okay, so after this, I'm going to put in some textures to make this look like a very old and weathered map. So let me look at my notes here. And so the first one we're going to do is add an old parchment texture. And all the textures I'm using in the overlays, I'll have links to them to the websites where I found them for free on the internet, so you can grab those and use those as well. So we're going to open up this texture first, this kind of grunge stained old paper texture. And I'm going to do Control A, Control C to copy, come back over here to my parchment map, do Control V. Now if we scroll this out, I'm going to show you that this texture is much bigger than the map. Again, you definitely want to label all of your layers. So let's go ahead and do that. Old parchment. We're going to do Control T for transform. You'll notice that it is bigger than the map itself. So we're just going to grab this and just shrink it down a little bit. But we want it bigger than the map itself. So you could either just stretch it out just kind of like this, which will be fine. Let's zoom in here so I can show you another way to do it. If you hold down Shift and grab one of these handles, you could drag it out like that if you wanted to. Just to make sure I'm covering it, I actually just prefer to do this and take it out just a little bit just to make sure I've got the entire map covered. So once I do that, then I'm going to start messing with opacities here. So for this one, I kept the blending mode as normal, just doing some experimentation. And then I changed the opacity actually on this one to 50%. So you'll see that you're starting to see a little bit of the old parchment in there, some of the speckles from it, some of the coloring's different, but we can do a little bit better. So then what I did was I duplicated this layer, the old parchment layer. So let's duplicate that. You can leave it at old parchment copy, that's fine. And you'll see that now we're getting even more of the effect of the parchment. But it's a little too much. It's kind of hard to see the map underneath and the labels. So what I did here was, here I did start messing with some of the blending modes. So for this one, I changed the blending mode to darker color. Now you can mess with different blending modes and get different kind of effects. You could do dissolve, which really doesn't have that much of a difference from normal. You could do darken. Multiply makes it even darker. So if you really want more of that parchment feel, that would be a good one. Color burn, if you want to make it look a little burned. There's linear burn. You could lighten it up. Again, you've got screen, which makes it even lighter. You've got different options you can work with. You can even just do overlay if you just want the texture just to be like an overlay on top of it. But again, I chose darker color because that's the one that I like the best. So I did darker color, and then for this one I changed the opacity to 65%. Okay, that's starting to look pretty good. Except I wanted the borders to look even more weathered. Because parchment and paper tends to kind of weather from the outside in. So I wanted it to look like that. So, excuse me, I went online and I found a texture that I really liked, more of an overlay right here. And this one you can find for free as well, and I'll put the link on the internet as well. And so I just opened this one up, and I'm going to do Control A to select it all, Control C, come back over here, Control V to paste it in. You can automatically tell that it's bigger than the map itself. So we're going to go ahead and let's let's name our layer here, Grungy Border. And we're going to do Control T, and you can see it's a lot bigger than the map itself. So this one you're kind of going to want to play with and see how much of the border you actually want in there. So now notice that when I'm doing the handles here, like I did with the parchment texture, that it resizes it, the height and the width. So if you want to mess with this and change this one side, you can hold down Shift again and just raise this up and just get however much you want in there. So I'm just going to play with this a little bit because I really don't want the darker parts. I more want the light gray parts more than the black. So I'm just going to mess with this a little bit, kind of bring this out a bit, and let's see, that looks pretty good. And I could bring this down a bit, but then these are going to start going off the edges. So I think I'm going to leave it like that. So I'm going to press the check mark so that Photoshop accepts it. So now you're looking at this and you're probably thinking, okay, this doesn't really look all that good. I mean, this is really, I guess you can leave it like this. It does look like a pretty weathered map. But I like changing it just a little bit. I wanted it to blend in more with the map. So what I did is I messed with the blending modes on this one. So I changed this one actually to screen. And I kind of like this one because now it's given a little bit more of that weathered edge. But I also messed with the opacity a little bit, and I changed the opacity to 66%. And so by lowering the opacity, then it's blending in even a little bit more with the parchment. You can see more of the map underneath, which I liked. And then to mess with it even more, oops, I accidentally put a text layer in, so let's get rid of that. To mess with it even more, I took this and put it in between the two parchment layers. And so now it's blending in even more with the map, which I really, really like. So let's come in here and let's take a look. And you'll see here that the labels are still pretty easy to see. So if you wanted to make it look even more weathered, and one of the things I want to point out I did like about this is that where the grungy border comes in, you can see it looks like it's fading out the text a little bit. So like right there, right over here where it has Gates of Barovia, and I really like the way that looked. So if you want the lettering to look even more faded out, you could always mess with the opacity a little bit more. Let's see what happens if we change the opacity here a little bit. So that brings it in a little bit more, but what if we take it down? You'll see where it's starting to fade out the text. So depending on how faded that you want this to look, you can mess with the opacity of it, and that'll kind of fade out the lettering a little bit. I'm going to leave it back at 65 because I like the way that looks. So we'll just leave it at 65 for now. Okay, so now this is looking pretty good. This is playable right here, and it looks like an old map. But I wanted the borders. If you remember, I had a torn edge border around there, and I really like that. So I want to put that in here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as a JPEG. And oops. Let's go ahead and save this first, a PDF. And then let's do save as copy. And then there we go. Let's change this to a JPEG. One of the things I found out with Photoshop is you could just do save or a quick export of the JPEG or a PNG, but I found out that Photoshop messes with the sizing of the image. And so I found that if you do save as copy and then do JPEG or PNG, whichever file format you're working with, then it doesn't mess with the size of the image. Why it does it, I have no idea. So let's go ahead and change the name of our file here. And let's do parchment with grunge border. I like to name my file names like that because I tend to do things in steps, and so I like that so that way I can keep track of the steps that I've actually done. And so let's go ahead and save this, and then we're going to close all this down because we don't need these anymore. We technically don't need this anymore either. So I think I'm going to get rid of that. And let's go ahead, and here is our map again. Okay, because now we got the JPEG instead of the Photoshop file. Okay, so now how did I put the border in? And this one's kind of tricky, so I'm going to go slow as I work through this. But the first thing I did was I brought in my burnt paper texture that I found online, and I'll have the link for that one as well. And so here is the burnt edges that I actually used. And so what I did with this one is same thing, Control A to select all of it, Control C, and then I brought it in. It's much smaller than the map itself, so it needs to be resized. Let's go ahead and change our layer name so we don't, even though there's only 2 layers, but just a good practice so you don't get confused. And then I'm going to have to click on this and get rid of the background. The way you do this is locked, which means you can't do anything with it. So you need to double click here, and that gets rid of the lock on there. So now you can manipulate the file. So we're going to come back up to our burnt paper, and I'm going to expand this out a little bit. And it's okay for it to be smaller than the map itself. And I'm going to show you why in just a little bit. So let's do this, and we can stretch this out. And one of the things I notice about Photoshop is that it looks pixelated right now, but don't worry about that, because once you click on the check mark to accept it, that pixelation will go away. I didn't like this little edge sticking out here, so for my map, I actually did this and just kind of chopped that off. It just, don't ask me why, it just irritated me a little bit, and I know it doesn't make any sense, but okay. So once I did this, I clicked the check mark here, and then I went ahead and let's see, I need to put, this is fine just like it is. I'm going to go ahead and change the opacity of this, and you can do different settings however you want to do. I used 70%, okay, and that way you can start to see some of the map coming through. But actually I think I'm going to, hang on a second, let me check my notes and make sure I've got this right. Okay, I think maybe I had the map of Barovia on top. Let's take a look here. Is that what I had done? Yep, that's what I did. I had it backwards. So let's come down here and change this back to 100%. Okay, so now you'll notice that part of the map is going off. That was perfectly fine to me. I didn't care about that. You can still see its mountains. That way it kind of looked like that part of the map had been ripped away. So I didn't really mind that. You just want to make sure that if you've got text labels on there that they're not going off the map. So if we look at this real quickly, we can see that labels here, that looks good. The clouds for the mists are fine. Svalage Woods is fine there. Svalage Woods is fine there. Gates of Barovia is right on the edge, which actually looks kind of cool because it indicates there used to be, you know, some more of the map there, which I think is fine. So that looks pretty good to me. I don't think there's any labels that I'm missing. And if you're concerned about it and just want to check, you can always hide the burnt paper file and then change this back to 100%. And let's see if there's any labels. So Mount Gacchus. Let's see if I was missing anything there. So let's change this back to 70. Okay, nope, that text is still there too. So I really think we're good here with this one. Okay, so then what I did was I merged these layers together. And I'm going to show you why. Because you'll notice that you've got part of the map here from the map of Barovia showing around the edge. And we need to get rid of that. Okay? Now, it does have, it looks like it's transparent. It's really not. So we need to get rid of that background here. So here's what I did to get rid of this. And this took me a little bit to do. I'm not going to show you, I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm just going to show you a little bit about what to do and show you what it looks like. So I added a layer mask to this. And what I always do with my layer masks is sometimes it's hard to tell when you're erasing part of a layer mask to see what to make it transparent, like a transparent background. It's sometimes hard to keep track of if you've actually missed anything. So one of the things I started doing when I first started messing with Photoshop was adding a fill layer. And I tend to put a solid red fill layer in all of behind whatever image I'm working on. And I'll show you why here in just a bit. So you can see that, oh, it actually was transparent. My mistake. But we're still showing parts of the map here. That's right, the burnt texture part was transparent. So that part was transparent, but we're still seeing part of the map behind there, which we obviously don't want. So I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to zoom in here on this part of the map. And I'm going to press B to change to a brush. And you want to make sure that if you're using a mask, let's make sure we're on the mask itself. And you want to make sure that black is your foreground color, so that way you're erasing things and making the parts of your image you're going to be using the brush on, that they are going to be transparent. So what I did here was I just very carefully, and honestly, you really don't have to be that careful. Remember that for this particular application, it's meant to look like an old, weathered map. So if you're not perfect and you cut in a little bit, that's actually not a problem. Just try to go as carefully as you can around the edges to get rid of this. And then what you could do to make your brush smaller and larger is do the brackets. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Just zoom in a little bit. And this does seem like painstaking work, but I can assure you guys, it is absolutely worth it. And I'm just going to do a little bit here, and then just show you what the end result is, the part that I have done here. So let's go to like right here. I'm going to cut across here and start erasing some of this. And I'll turn off the red background so you guys can see this. I might make my brush a little bit bigger. Make this go a little bit quicker. And I'm just going to erase this. Erase all this here. Get all this up here. Let's come over here. Maybe we'll do a little bit more here. And also, if you make a mistake, and let's say you just, all of a sudden your mouse just goes whoop, and you make a mistake like that, it's not a problem. Just click on these arrows here, change it to white, and just paint back in. And then you'll have your, what was erased, back again. So don't panic if you accidentally, you just get like a spasm or something and go, into your map and take out a big, huge part of it. That's not a problem. So I'm going to erase this a little bit. Let's zoom out and let's see what this looks like. So the way you can check this is you can just turn off and just make hide your color fill color. So this part is transparent, so you can see the effect you're going to have here once you get done erasing all this. If you don't like using the red background and you just want to see the transparency when it happens, you can do that. So I could just come here and just get rid of some of this right here and just go very carefully down here. And let's do, you know what, I might just do this very quickly and just do the whole entire map, because again, I mentioned to you guys that it's okay if it's not perfect. So I'm really not going to be concerned about doing this perfectly here. So I'm going to see if I can do this as quick as I can. May not do the whole map. I might just do like 2 sides, just so you can get an idea, a really good idea of what it looks like. And let's keep working here. And parts of the egg are going to come off, but I think that's going to be cool, because again, that's going to make it look like there was part of a map there. And if you see some dark edges here, you want to try to keep those dark edges, because that's what makes the map look like it's really old and burned. So just do the best you can. And again, you can always, change the foreground color to white and then paint back in, if you mess anything up. It's really not that big of a deal. On some applications, you need to be really, really careful, but for this, it's not that big of a deal. Alright, so we're just going to keep doing this here. Tell you what, I might just go quickly down the edges here, and then I'll just make my brush bigger and just go up the sides. And let's start down here, because I'm using a mouse and not a tablet. So for this, a mouse works fine. It's a little tiring. Oh, oops, see? Forgot to hold down my spacebar before I went to move that. Good thing I wasn't on the map itself. Let's get that. And I do better going up than going down. So I may just do that right here. Get rid of that. Okay, I've almost got this whole side here. So let's get this. And then let's come right here. Let's get this. Okay, so I've got one whole side here. And let me just get this a little bit away from the map. And okay, I'm going to turn my red back on just to make sure I haven't missed anything. Because sometimes you may get like little bits like that, and when your red's off, you may not see it. So that's one reason why I like leaving the contrasting background on. It makes it easier for, like I said, to see if I missed anything. Make the brush a little bit bigger. Let's come up here and get this. Let's get this. Okay, keep moving up here. And I was really happy with the final result of this. And I think my players really liked it, because in our game they already found the map. And I think they really liked it and thought it looked pretty cool. Alright, so we're going to zoom out here, and I'm just going to turn the red off, so you can kind of just see the effect. I mean, once you save this as a PNG file, then it's going to be a transparent background. You can put it wherever you want. I use Fantasy Grounds to run my games, so I just imported the PNG file. Fantasy Grounds recognizes PNGs and transparencies, so it looked really cool, you know, once I got it in there. So this has been a look at how you can take a map you make in Wonderdraft or any other application and put it in Photoshop, do some post-processing, and you can end up with a map that looks just like this. Thanks everybody for watching. Hope you're doing well, and we'll see you next time on the Digital Map Makers Academy.